Good morning. Before I start, I'd like to thank you guys for the beautiful card and the gift that was inside of it. You know, I have every card that this church has ever given me. Wow. It's getting kind of big. This chapter in Genesis is a chapter that raises more questions than answers. But you're familiar with this story. Cain and Abel, brothers, they decide to give a sacrifice to God. God accepts the one brother's sacrifice, and he does not accept the others. What brother, what was his name that God accepted the sacrifice? Abel. You don't know much about him, except that he was a son of Adam. He had a brother named Cain. Now, when they offered sacrifices, what kind of sacrifice did Abel offer? Blood. He offered the best from his animal, so he offered up blood sacrifice. Cain, on the other hand, was a tiller of the ground. He grew vegetables, and when he brought his offering, what did he bring? He brought fruit, vegetables, and he brought the best of what he grew. Now you need to understand that. The best of what he grew, that was one of the reasons why he got so mad. Because this was the very best of what he had, and he offered it to the Lord. But the Lord kind of snubbed his offering in his own mind. Okay? Isn't it funny how human nature just does not change? Once the fall of Adam and Eve, human nature does not change. It doesn't matter how far back you go. This is before the flood, right? This is first generation children from Adam and Eve. And yet he got his feelings hurt, and it led to murder. That's called passion. And he allowed those feelings and that anger to be so great that he took it out on his brother. Was he really mad at his brother? Who was he mad at? But he takes it out on his brother. Okay? And so, and you wonder why him and his brother are in the field together? You know what I'm saying? There's deceit there. Because this is the question for you. Was this just an act of passion at the moment, or was this premeditated? Deceit, deception, lies, leading to death. Nothing has changed. We are capable of doing the exact same things. Just turn on the news every day, and you see this played out all the time. Okay? Human nature is human nature. If evolution was true, you think we would have evolved to be better people than that. If evolution is true, we wouldn't evolve to be better people. We would get worse. Because in evolution, only the strong survive. Think about that. Think about all those characters of goodness that God has. Those are not characters that would help you if only the strong survive, and the strong traits would be the dominant ones. Okay? So, let's read here. And let's start with verse 5. But he did not respect Cain and his offering. This is God. God did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. Has it ever occurred to you why God is able to speak to them one-on-one? He sends a sacrifice to God. God does not accept his sacrifice, but then God talks to him. And the thing you need to realize is Cain doesn't freak out because God is talking to him. Right? It's like this is a normal occurrence. And understand this. Once Adam and Eve sinned, God didn't just leave them alone. He may not have met with them face to face, but he still talked to them. And it wasn't just Adam and Eve that he talked to. He talked to their sons. So he talks to Cain and asks him, why has your countenance fell? Why has your mood gotten so dark? And Cain doesn't go, wow, who is that? He knows who it is, and he answers him like they've had conversations before.
He knew God.
And that did not stop him from killing his brother. Nothing changes. Humanity is still the same. You have to have a living, dwelling relationship with this God. You may know about Him. You may even talk to Him. But that doesn't mean that you're in a saved relationship with Him. So, like I said, I find this funny how this conversation goes on. So the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen?" Now, is this good advice that God gives? Think about this. It's really good advice, and it's good advice for us to this day. Okay? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you. But what is God's response? There's no difference between Cain's day and our day. God has called us for the same thing, and that is not to allow sin to rule us, but that we are to rule over sin. And there was no difference in how you did that in Cain's day and our day. God did not accept his sacrifice, right? But God says, if you do well, you will be what? Accepted. Accepted by who? If you do well, you will be accepted by God. So something in this sacrifice was not right and not well. He did not do well in the coming to the Lord with the giving of the sacrifice. Do you see how that plays out in the context of this? God says to him after his countenance falls, if you do right, you're going to be accepted. So apparently he didn't do right. What did he do right in? In the coming to God with his sacrifice. That's why he was angry. That's why his countenance fell. What does all that mean? What did he do wrong? He gave God the best that he had. What did he do wrong? What did you say?
He didn't obey God.
He didn't obey God. Now, how do you get that? So, you get that he didn't obey God because God didn't accept the sacrifice. Right? So there was something wrong with the sacrifice. But it never tells you from chapter 2 or 3 to here in 4 that he had to sacrifice a lamb. It doesn't tell you that. Okay? Right? It doesn't tell you that. But what you know is that when God clothed Adam and Eve, he had to take an animal. Right? And when he took that animal to take the skin off, you're not going to do it alive. Right? It caused the death of that animal. So blood was shed to give them clothing. Now they had clothing on before that, right? They tried to do it themselves. They sewed fig leaves together. That would have been enough. It wasn't cold. Right? No, it wasn't cold. Think about it. It wasn't cold until after the flood. Right? It wasn't that they needed protection from the elements. Why wasn't the fig leaves enough of clothing for them? Because they were trying to cover their shame. They weren't trying to get warm. They weren't trying to cover their skin from the beating down of the sun. They were trying to cover their shame. What was it that actually covered their shame? The skin of the animal or the forgiveness of God through the shedding of blood? Amen. That helps you to understand, coming to Cain and Abel, why Cain got so upset and why God says to him what he said. If you do well, if you approach me the way I say you should approach me, then you will be accepted. This is righteousness by faith. Cain's was trying to get righteousness by works. Lord, I have grown this. I give this to you. It's the best that I got. And God said, your best isn't good enough. And that got him upset. So why was my brother's best good enough? We did the same work. I work every day. He works every day. Because it's not about work. It's about faith. Because it wasn't the lamb that was acceptable to God, it was the shedding of the blood. Because without the shedding of the blood, there can be no remission of sin. This is what the whole Sabbath school lesson was about today. And that is that Jesus not was, but is our sacrifice. He has become our atonement. He is our substitute. Okay? When Abel offered his offering, he offered it in the hope of the substitute that would come. Do you not remember what God told Eve? That in her offspring there would come one who would bruise the serpent's head, and that the serpent would bruise his heel. When Eve bore her first child, who was Cain, she said, I have got a man-child from the Lord, and she thought that that child would be this Redeemer. And he wasn't. God laid down to them, and they understood what his requirements were. No ifs, ands, or buts, because Abel offered the right thing and Cain offered the wrong thing. Abel came to God through faith. Cain came to God through works. One was accepted, one was rejected. And when Cain was rejected, God talked to him and explained to him, if you come to me on my terms and not your terms, you will do well and I will accept you. And he didn't want to do that. Even after he kills his brother, he still did not want to come to God on his terms. And now you see in the offsprings and the lineages, two lines of people. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's look at this. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you shall rule over it. How, from the fall of Adam, is any human being ever to rule over sin? How can that be accomplished? Only through the indwelling of God's Holy Spirit, and that comes only by the acceptance of God's salvation, Christ. In Cain and Abel's day, it was the Christ that would come. In our day, it's the Christ that has come. As I said, nothing changes. From the fall of Adam to our day today. God, the Bible says, is the same when? Today and how? So if God had a different way to save them and a different way to save us, then you can't have that verse, because God wouldn't be the same. When it says God is the same, what is that talking about? It means that He does not change. His character does not change. And if the law is His character, then the requirements do not change. Then, verse 8, now Cain talked with Abel, his brother. And it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. Cain talked with his brother Abel, Cain talked with Abel, his brother. They talk, and then it says it came to pass, which means after they talked, time went by. And then they're in the field, and then he rises up against them. Doesn't tell you what they talked about, but apparently it wasn't a good conversation, right? That Cain was angry. This is why I look at this verse and see that Cain's actions were premeditated. Because it says they talked, and then it came to pass, time goes by, and then Cain and Abel are in the field. It doesn't say they talked then, it says that when they were alone in the field, that Cain rose up against his brother and he killed him. Premeditation. He planned this. And this was after God warned him. Did the death of Abel take God by surprise? Do you see how God worked? God knew, and God tried to warn Cain, don't do this. Don't allow this sin to fester and dwell within you. Because if it does, the outcome is going to be very bad. And was God right? No. As always. Verse 8, he kills his brother. And in verse 9, then the Lord said to Cain, "Where's your brother?" Cain says, "I do not know." And don't you find this next sentence kind of strange? What was the next sentence?
Am I?
What does that refer to? Who was the tender of sheep? Cain didn't tend sheep. Be his brother's keeper, that's a reference to tending sheep. Okay? Am I my brother's keeper? Is it my responsibility to look after him like he looks after his sheep? He's his own man. He can do what he wants. Why are you asking me? Can you imagine talking to God like that after you just killed your brother? Does that not strike you as strange? Do you understand either this is true and this is real and this happened, or this is made up? And we're all pretty much in agreement that this is real, this is true, this has happened. I want you to understand this. I want you to see just how bold sin will make you, even in the presence of a holy, consuming God. What was Cain's answer to God when he asked, "Where's your brother?" What, am I his keeper? How do I know? You ever had your teenager respond to you like that? And what do you want to do to that teenager when they respond to you like that? And yet, God is not like us, right? God deals patiently with Cain. He commits murder, and God deals patiently with him. That's the love that God has. But brothers and sisters, that's the character that God requires in us. Do you understand that? We are to be like Christ. That is what it is to be like Christ. To deal patiently with the wicked, with those who have offended and hurt you. So, and I said, God talks to Cain, and it's like God talks to him on a regular basis. And it's no big deal. Right? Familiarity breeds what? This is how deep and dark sin is. That it will allow you to view a holy God in this light. He's familiar, and then you end up having contempt for him. Verse 10, he said, "What have you done? For the voice of your brother's" what? Blood. The life is in the blood. "The voice of your brother blood cries out to me from the ground." I want you to see the pattern of this, how God works. Okay, the pattern of how God works. Adam and Eve sinned. Is that right? God came looking for them like he did every day at the cool of the evening. And he does not condemn them when he sees them, but he questions them and asks them, "What is this that you have done?" And then he brings in that response hope, salvation, assurance that you are not left alone and you will not be destroyed. He saves Adam and Eve after their transgression. And here comes Cain in his transgression, and God should have blotted him out. Life for life. Blood for blood. Right? Think about that, because that's the way we are. Is that right? And you're going to see this. This is the way people have always been when God gives them his punishment. Okay? Life for life. But God talks to him. And God, before he even does this deed, God tries him to get him to look from a different perspective. Don't do this. Don't dwell on this anger. You can control and you can overcome sin through a relationship with me. And he didn't do it. And he kills his brother. And God still gives him hope. He doesn't come down as the God of thunder and lightning and condemn him. But he talks to him and asks him. And you see the response that Cain gave when God, in his mercy, showed him mercy? Most of us want to be shown mercy, but we don't like weakness. And that was sometimes the way we view God. It's the way they view Christ. We don't want a king and a conqueror like him. How's he ever going to be able to overcome the Romans? Okay, think about that. They didn't meet his expectations. Or he didn't meet their expectations. Right? So now God hands out the punishment. In verse 11 he says, so now you are what? Cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth. What does it mean that when he tills the ground, it shall no longer yield its fruit? He was a farmer. That's how he fed himself. That means you are going to starve. You ever think about that? He wasn't tilling it because he was going to be dependent on somebody else to give him food. You see that in that verse? Because the ground is cursed, and if he tries to plant something, it's not going to come up. It's not going to live. What does it mean to be a vagabond? Homeless and a wanderer. And a fugitive. Meaning when people see you, they're going to view you as a criminal. What do you have to worry? There's only him and his brother, his mom and his dad. Right? Now think about this, because this is where the questions come in. Okay? Cain says after this, this is more than I can handle. Whoever sees me will what? There was nobody left. There was only his mother, his father, and him. But you have to look and understand, it doesn't tell you how much time has passed. It doesn't tell you, at this point, if Eve bore daughters yet. Okay? It tells you that they had Cain and Abel. If Eve was the mother of the entire human race, and God created just Adam and Eve first, and everything came from them, then for Cain to take a wife, where did she come from? His family. You guys get that, right? You guys kind of quiet. You have to think this through. If he was worried about people killing him, who would it be? His family. Doesn't this make sense that God put a mark on him so that when people came to see him, they wouldn't kill him because they'd see the mark? If you weren't part of his family, would you really care if he killed Abel? Right? But if you were part of that family, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, blood for blood. Do you understand now why he said, when people see me, they'll kill me? He had to worry about his own family. It wasn't Adam and Eve, but the offspring. Right? Think about this. Did it take a longer period of time for them to produce a baby? It takes 9 months now, right? You think that was different before the flood? There's no problem not. That's the way God designed it. That's the way it was. So if you live for 900 some years and you could produce children for 500 of those 900 years, 400 of those years, and it only took 9 months, how many kids do you think you could produce? Have you thought about that? And you start to see just how quickly the earth can be populated? Okay? Let's say that, as you find in here, sometimes it took them to be 100 years old before they had their first child. Okay? But they could bear children for the next 300 or 400 years. And it only took 9 months to have it. How many children could you possibly have? Okay? See how big your families could get? You see why Cain maybe was worried about somebody finding him and killing him? Okay, now, once Cain and his wife had children, then it wasn't just Adam and Eve, but now you have a whole new bloodline. Alright? Let's say it took 50 years before they were mature enough to have children. It's a lot of children that could be populated and born. Your families could get huge. But keep that in mind as we continue on with these verses. All right, so Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden." What was Cain's biggest worry? He would be hidden from God's face. They had a relationship. Wasn't the greatest, but it was a relationship. He knew his dependence on God. And he was worried that he was cast out from God's face. Think about that. Like I said, these sets of verses raise more questions than answers. And it's written that way for a purpose, because you have to think these things through. And the Spirit will illuminate your mind and give you answers if you really want them. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground, and I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, and it will happen that anyone who finds me will what? Again.